Being and Caring, A Psychology for Living by Victor Daniels and Laurence J. Horowitz, as read by the Happy President. Part 4, Knowing Our Minds. Chapter 20, States of Consciousness. Gene Roddenberry, creator of Star Trek, once commented, "Infinity extends not only outward, but also inward in all directions. The cosmos outside us and the cosmos inside us are one and the same. The journey into inner space includes exploring our own states of consciousness and learning to move beyond some of the limitations we've grown used to." Usual states. Each of us experiences several states of consciousness each day, though we may or may not recognize them as such. Sometimes my mind is sharp and alert, and I think and speak clearly and well. Other times I feel dreamy, hazy, tense, or agitated. All this is a normal flow. Sometimes I can selectively tune myself to a given state. Other times my mind drifts from one to the other. Traditionally, states of consciousness have been defined in terms of mental events, dreams, hallucinations, verbal problem solving, pre-reflective awareness, the direct sensing of something that precedes our thoughts about it, and so on. More recently, Western psychology has recognized that the type and level of physical and emotional arousal also play a role. Verbal problem solving in a crisis, for example, is different from verbal problem solving in which I'm peaceful. In different states, the body has different chemical and muscular responses. The technique of biofeedback is based on that fact. It uses ongoing measurement of such physical responses as skin temperature and brain waves to help us identify and guide what we're doing with our minds and bodies. Recognizing and entering different states. At times, my state of consciousness is not appropriate to my activity, or I seem to be imprisoned in a state that hinders my effectiveness, health, or peace of mind. In a study of normal persons living in Hawaii, psychologists Martin Katz and Ken Sanborn in 1981 found that almost half reported feeling as if they cannot get certain thoughts out of their minds. Katz and Sanborn remark, "This is a little shocking. We fool ourselves into thinking we have control over our minds. We don't." In different states of mind, the very same street can seem friendly or threatening. A large part of what the world is like depends on how we view it, as this Sufi tale shows. A father said to his double-seeing son, "Son, you see two instead of one." "How can that be?" the boy replied. "If I were, there would seem to be 4 moons up there in place of 2. On the other hand, we're aware of some of the changes our minds go through and the way certain kinds of events affect us. The sound of noisy machinery or the wind through the trees moves our consciousness in different directions. How can we use our recognition that even in daily life we move in and out of different states of consciousness? There are at least 3 ways. First, we can develop the habit of noticing at any given moment the state of consciousness we are in. Sometimes that leads to spontaneous adjustments. I notice that I'm angry and agitated in a situation where that does no one any good, and I stop producing thoughts that feed that way of being and substitute more relaxed, compassionate ones in their place. Second, we can regulate our activities to fit our patterns of consciousness. When we were building my house, the head carpenter did all possible thinking and calculating in the morning. In the afternoon, we finished work that we'd started before lunch, just sawing and nailing. "I make fewer mistakes," he said, "if I figure things out early in the day when my mind is alert. And after 4 o'clock, when I'm most fatigued and inattentive, anything dangerous or difficult is off limits." Similarly, we've all experienced looking for something we've lost and being so hurried and harried we look right at the object and don't see it. Later, when calmer, we're more apt to find it. Third, we can alter our states of consciousness to fit the situation. We may do this with food or drink. We can express a feeling we've been withholding or change what we tell ourselves about a situation. Meditation, described later in this chapter, is a powerful method for producing such alterations. We're likely to be more effective and enjoy ourselves more when we use the various states available. I don't want to spend all my time sitting in quiet contemplation. When I need to be assertive, solve an equation, or saw up logs, I need to move into mental dispositions that fit those activities. Physiological evidence confirms this. When I meditate, for instance, my brain produces mostly alpha waves, indicating relaxed passive alertness, with a scattering of theta waves, which is characteristic of deep sleep. When I start working a math problem, it switches into beta waves, which reflect a state of actively manipulating concepts. Alternate realities. We have available not only alternative states of consciousness, but also alternative realities to which we can respond. Imagine, says psychologist Laurence, two maps of the New York area. One shows roads, buildings, bridges, and other familiar features. The other, a map used by airline pilots, shows only radio beacons. These equally accurate, useful maps of the same area have no symbols in common. Each is a valid picture of the same reality, but neither is the valid picture. In our concepts of the way things are, sometimes we get caught in just that trap. We assume that our ideas about things, our maps, are the only correct ones. That causes problems, Leshan points out, because no one world picture works completely. A world view is not a map of reality, but of one way of conceiving of it. We can draw upon many perspectives and at the same time seek to understand the patterns that connect them. This doesn't mean that all ideas about the nature of things are equally valid. We're likely to operate more effectively if we have various maps of reality to serve different purposes. Then we have options. Certain elements in a worldview sharply restrict our available states of consciousness. These elements are 1. A conviction that our way is the only right way to construe events, and 2. A self-righteous attitude accompanying this conviction. These viewpoints have roots in an underlying feeling of personal inadequacy. At some level, I feel unloved, unfulfilled, or powerless. My dogmatic attitude anesthetizes these uncomfortable feelings. Unfortunately, it also stops me from doing much about them. To maintain my limited picture of reality, I stop myself from entertaining perspectives or states of consciousness that might modify it. Thus, rigid ideas about the nature of reality interfere with our flexibility and the full use of our consciousness. Walt Anderson describes the simple exercise of adding the phrase "up to now" to any statement about what kind of person you are, what you believe, what you like or dislike, and what you can't do. Distraction and centering. In response to the stressors of modern living, it's all too common to be hurried and distracted. Charlene, a psychology intern under my supervision, used every moment to learn as much as possible. She worked 6 days a week and studied on the 7th. As she collected so much from outside her, I could see her losing touch with herself. She began feeling as though bits and pieces of her were flung all over the map. Finally, I said, "You need to slow down and connect with yourself, so that when you're with someone, you're there." When I take time to center myself before entering a situation or starting to talk with someone, I'm more in touch with myself and more in touch with the person or the task. To find my own center, sometimes I need time by myself to find out what I feel and think and what I want for myself now. At other times, I need a way to center myself amid my activities. Close your eyes and go directly to where you think your physical center is. Check your centeredness by moving slightly in each direction, and then take your deep, slow breaths. You can also center while you're sitting. If you're on a chair, sit well forward so that you can't touch the back when you're at the rear of your circle. If you're on the floor, double a pillow or cushion and sit on the forward edge of it, so that your knees are tilted slightly downward and you can keep your spine erect easily. Otherwise, you'll probably have to lean forward uncomfortably to stay upright. One form of centering can be called quiet time meditation. Robert was struggling with whether to get a divorce. He appeared constantly upset and unsettled, saying, "I can't seem to get any perspective on it." "How much time do you give yourself to sit with your thoughts and feelings, free of distraction?" I asked. "None," he replied. "As soon as I get home, I turn on the TV, and it's on until I go to bed. Whenever I'm not watching it or doing something else, I read a paper or magazine." Try sitting quietly with yourself for half an hour each day with no TV, no radio, no magazines, no distraction of any kind, I suggested. Giving himself that time made a big difference. Such times when we're with ourselves without doing anything are an essential part of being centered. I don't go into those quiet, empty times with a program. I must deal with this thing, or I must solve this stuff. I may have things that I need to deal with. I always have unfinished business I've neglected. If they come up, I deal with them. If not, I just experience myself as I am right now. This is my time to be with myself, with no distractions, and to get out of the programmed character of so much of my daily life. I can focus on the feeling, the texture, the color of my experience at this instant. If I always have a lot to deal with when I sit down, it means I'm not giving myself enough quiet time to keep current with my life. In its simplest form, meditation is simply a calming of the mind. With the pressure of outer tasks and distractions set aside, our inner clamor can die down and we can truly listen, both to ourselves and to our surroundings. The first time I experienced my silence, I was shocked by the lack of chatter in my head. Transpersonal and other altered states of consciousness. The last 2 decades have witnessed great interest in altered states of consciousness, those produced by drugs, those that occur spontaneously, and those induced through meditative disciplines. People under the influence of LSD, psilocybin, peyote, strong marijuana, and other drugs report experiences of minutes stretching into hours, distances expanding and contracting, intensifications of sensation, hallucinations, and experiences described as total oneness with humankind and the universe. Such experiences can be either extremely beautiful events or incredible nightmares from which there seems no escape. Other drugs, like the various kinds of downers available by prescription and illegally on the street, cause a lowering of arousal level, a pleasant mellowness, and sometimes loss of muscular coordination. Still others, like cocaine and amphetamines, cause heightened alertness and a speeding up of the metabolism without great alterations in the content of consciousness. And narcotics, like heroin and opium, lead to hallucinatory dreams, severe and often lifelong addiction, and loss of interest in almost everything except the narcotic. Many other drugs can also be addictive, including such socially acceptable ones as alcohol, tobacco, and caffeine. Transcendent experiences that occur spontaneously have been labeled peak experiences by Abraham Maslow. These are times of feeling at one with everything and everyone, that occur unexpectedly and that sometimes profoundly affect our subsequent lives. Tibetan writings, which refer to such states as higher alertness, describe them with terms like stillness, openness, clarity, peace, and freshness. Such experiences are often part of what have come to be called transpersonal states of consciousness. Transpersonal states include an element of transcending our usual perceptions and definitions of reality, as well as an identification with the welfare of other people and beings rather than being limited by our own cravings and strivings. Psychologist Sam Shapiro writes, "A transpersonal perspective rejects any fixed upper limit of self-actualization and also discourages the suggestion of comparison and achievement. Transpersonal realization is not a state to desire or achieve in any traditional sense. It is a form of grace in which a person's pre-existing transpersonal essence is revealed." Transpersonal consciousness does not consist only of ecstatic events. To pursue peak experiences can create an intrusive division between them and ordinary daily living. Transpersonal consciousness and peak experiences, Shapiro points out, are not the same. Though transpersonal consciousness can lead to peak experiences, obsessively seeking peak experiences can interfere with transpersonal consciousness. I lose the identification with something larger than myself and end up back on square two, sensation seeking. But when I welcome transcendent experiences in whatever form they take, whether dramatic and overpowering, or quiet and almost ordinary, another side emerges. I find a quality of awe and wonder in everyday events, like picking up a warm, newly laid egg. In this state, I just am, hanging out with myself, you, the children, the cosmos, and I know it's all right. Psychiatrist Gerald May calls this a pilgrimage home. He writes, "A pilgrimage starts from a certain familiar territory where there are few surprises. Then one begins a journey into lands that are not so familiar. Many things seem special. Then when the journey is finished, one goes home again. Nothing has happened to change the world, and on the outside one may not appear to be too much different for having taken the trip, but inside there is a difference." A few lucky souls develop the capacity to experience such states naturally and easily. The rest of us have to work for them. Meditation is a practical method for doing that. It doesn't guarantee to take us into such a state, but creates a readiness in us in which it's more likely. Meditation. Formal and informal meditation techniques are tools to alter our states of consciousness. To many people in the West, the word meditation has a mystical and vaguely suspect feeling about it, but actually it's a practical, clear, simple process that anyone can use. What meditation does. Meditation helps us experience directly what we're doing in our minds and bodies. It helps us strengthen our ability to focus our attention where we wish and to minimize distraction. It augments our ability to reduce mental clutter, think clearly, and deal with problems effectively. We may be able to do less and accomplish more as a result of accurately perceiving what we do and don't need or need to do. Usually we can't do as yogis sometimes do, spending days in meditation, but as little as 5 minutes of formal meditation can significantly contribute to changing your mental, emotional, and physical state, including blood pressure, heartbeat, breathing, and muscle tension. Certain informal techniques require no extra time at all because they involve doing what you would do anyway, but in a somewhat different way. Gerald May writes, "Blink your eyes, take a breath, and see. And stay with that seeing until you begin to add something to it. Then blink your eyes, take a breath, and see again. This is the way things are, before any thought about it, before any fear or desire. In meditation, you have the opportunity of easing your grip on all your preconceptions and finding out that you are still there. You realize that hassles are merely figments of an overzealous mind." The Zen tradition advocates developing a mirror mind. Fujimoto Roshi in 1961 says, "The function of the mirror is to reflect what is before it. It remains quiet in spite of the activity of the reflections." Many people, when they first begin to meditate, complain about distractions. Barking dogs, vehicle noises, people entering the room, all these seem distracting. The concept of the mirror mind teaches us to be aware of these events as they are. They're not just distractions, they're things we notice as part of our meditation. So this is what's happening now. Non-directive meditation turns such noticing inward. In this practice, you sit in a formal meditating position and try to be aware of each thought and feeling that arises in you, noting your experience without judging it. Most meditative techniques involve concentration, consciously directing attention toward a specific object. A common misunderstanding is the idea that concentration means pushing things you don't want to think about out of your mind. Actually, that's impossible, because if you're trying not to think about something, you're still thinking about it. Rather, concentration involves focusing on what you do want to pay attention to. If your attention wanders elsewhere, that's okay. Just bring it back. So suppose I'm meditating on a candle, observing it carefully. A thought arises in my mind. I notice it and let it go. Another arises and drops away. Then another, and Suddenly, I notice that I'm watching mind movies of somewhere else and the candle has been forgotten. So I let the mind movies drop away and return my attention to the candle. That's concentration. Each different approach to meditation has its merits. You can learn to trust your intuitive sense of what you need for you at any given time. The best way for one person may be the hardest for someone else. You may want to try several different methods for a week or two, each before adopting one. Eventually, you may find that you use different methods for different situations. In general, the more distracted I feel, the more demanding the meditative technique I need to slow and center myself. When I'm fairly centered to begin with, I can use a very simple meditation. Some people have their own equivalents of meditation. For example, when my friend Mike goes fishing, he gets completely absorbed in each moment of what he does. As the fly hits the water, that moment is all that exists for him. Mike is centered in each instant of his experience of fishing. Posturing our minds. Sit on the forward edge of a chair or cushion. If you're sitting on the floor or outdoors on the ground, lay the sole of your right foot along your left thigh and then your left leg on top of your right, so that your left sole touches your right thigh. This is called the half lotus position. If this is hard for you, and some people's knees just aren't built to lie down flat, you can sit in a simple cross-legged position or sit upright on a chair without touching the back of the chair. If your legs are unusually flexible, you can lay each foot over the top of the opposite side in the full lotus posture. Now center yourself in relation to gravity. Then pull your shoulder blades back and your head backward in relation to your body so that your ears are approximately in line with your shoulders and your gaze slightly downward. Then drop your shoulders into a relaxed position. You can lay your hands in your lap or on your legs. One position is to place your left hand palm up on your right hand so that your left fingertips touch the spot where your right fingers and palm connect. Then touch your thumb tips so that your thumbs and first fingers form an oval. This is called a mudra. Alternatively, lay your hands palms up on your knees, then slide them up towards your waist until you find a place that feels comfortable. Now start with them by your waist and slide them downward towards your knees until you feel comfortable. Finally, find the place somewhere between the two you just found that feels best. Touch the thumb and the first finger of each hand together. Holding this posture is not so easy. Your back may get tired. Your legs may hurt. Your body is likely to slump as your mind drifts so that you have to bring yourself back into the proper posture. But this straight spine position not only allows the deepest breathing, but also stimulates the nervous system in a way that helps you stay alert. Zen Master S. Suzuki writes, "To take this posture itself is the purpose of our practice. When you have this posture, you have the right state of mind, so there is no need to try to attain some special state. If you slump, your mind will be wandering, and you will not be in your body." When you find yourself slumping, you can pay attention to how you feel in the position you've moved into. Sit that way for as long as you want to, continuing to be aware of the sensations in your body. Then, when you're ready to, sit in the centered posture again. This position is appropriate for most meditative practices. Methods for meditating. Most of the techniques described here include holding an erect posture and keeping a focus on your breathing, for breathing stands at the gateway between voluntary and involuntary functions. Working at that interface can help increase our conscious control over the automatic nervous system. Mantra meditation. The meditative approach best known in the West is probably Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's Transcendental Meditation, or TM. This variety of mantra meditation involves repeating the mantra, an especially chosen word or phrase, silently to yourself over and over again. TM teachers conduct an initiation ceremony in which they give each person a mantra. For some people, this is very helpful. Others, like Ram Dass, report excellent results with mantras that people choose for themselves. Actually, you can use any word or phrase that feels right to you as a mantra, including one of personal importance to you or one from your own religious tradition. Some people like the TM approach because it involves sitting in a comfortable chair rather than sitting up with an erect spine. In fact, any comfortable position will do. When I feel too tired for my usual meditation but want to calm and center myself, I do mantra meditation, sometimes while relaxing in a bathtub. If you fall asleep while doing this form of meditation, that's all right. As in other meditations, notice each thought as it begins to arise, and when you notice your mind has drifted, return your attention to your mantra. Many people find it most effective to intone their mantra in correlation with the rhythm of their breathing. Following your breath. Sit in the centered posture. Focus your awareness in your chest, feel the movement of your breath from inside, and let your breathing be your consciousness. Notice how shallow or deep your breath is, how tense or relaxed your chest, and whether you're breathing with your stomach, your chest, or both. When your breath is halting and irregular, or when you momentarily stop breathing entirely, notice that. When you remember to, check to see what you were thinking of a moment before that might have provoked the tinge of anxiety that caused you to stop breathing regularly. If you don't try to control or direct your breath but stay aware of it, eventually it will regulate itself. Each time you notice an idea beginning to form, you have the choice of thinking about it or keeping attention on your breathing. When you first begin breath following, your mind is likely to be much more centered toward the end of your meditation period than toward the beginning. When you set aside a matter with a promise to yourself to think about it then, however, it's important to keep that promise. You have to know you will really think about the matter later. Once you're adept at following your breath while breathing naturally, you might want to try meditating with the figure 8 breathing pattern described in Chapter 15. Take at least 10 seconds for each inhalation, 10 for each exhalation, and 3 to 5 seconds for the still points at the top and bottom of the figure 8. Counting meditation. As you follow your breath, silently count one number on each inhalation, leaving your exhalation empty to experience yourself and your surroundings. Count 1 on your first inhalation, 2 on your second, and so on up to 10. Take one complete breath, just sensing your present experience, then begin counting at 1 again. When you notice that you've lost count and drilled off, return to the last number you remember. If you've lost track of where you drifted away, start over again. You may want to close your eyes, visualize each number, and hear it in your head as you count. If you have a hard time seeing the number in your mind, try seeing just the top edge of it at first, and gradually you're likely to be able to see more and more of it. Let each number remind you to feel your breath. Once you're successfully doing the counting meditation described here, one small addition may help you to focus your attention. On your outgoing breath, silently count 1 each time as you count from 1 to 10 on your incoming breath. If you have closed your eyes, you might visualize this extra number as a subscript down in the right-hand corner of your visual field. After you've taken an empty breath and are ready to start counting from 1 to 10 again, count 2 on every exhalation, indicating that you're on your second series of 10, and so on. Continue for 10 series. Contemplation or reflective meditation. During meditation is a good time to contemplate difficult issues in your life and personal qualities you'd like to develop more fully. The latter part of a meditation period is usually the best time to do this. Place an awareness of your subject for contemplation in the background of your mind. Don't force yourself to think about it. Just let anything relevant that wants to come into your mind come in. If you want to let go of your object of concentration to follow a line of thought about the problem, go ahead. Points in the process. As long as you're taking time to sit quietly with yourself, everything you do is right. Staying aware of what you're doing, whatever that may be, is the most important thing. When I first began to meditate using a breath counting process, I went through several months feeling uncomfortable as I meditated. Over and over, I was bombarded by strong urges to get up, to walk around, to do anything except keep sitting there. What was happening? In everyday life, when I feel uncomfortable in my body, I move in a way that gives me relief. When I feel anxious, often I do something that distracts me. But when I sit in meditation, my response to each urge is the same. continue to sit and feel whatever I feel. Soon I begin to have available the new response of continuing to sit and do nothing. I can choose to act in this way of doing nothing, whereas before I had available only my automatic response. Through my discipline, I gain freedom. When my discomfort is physical, such as pain in my legs or back as I keep sitting, I can work with my awareness of my pain. Where exactly do I feel it? What is its character and size and shape? Does it change and move or stay the same? I can do this with an itch, a tingle, or a soreness in a muscle at any time and any place, answering these questions through direct awareness rather than with words. I can experience with moving my attention back and forth from my pain to my object of concentration. As I do this, I alternately make one of my figure and the other one a more of a distant background. 20 minutes each morning and evening is a recommended TM meditation period. I prefer at least half an hour once a day. If your meditation is uncomfortable enough that you think you might not continue, shorten your meditation period. Or switch to an easier method that gives you immediate good feelings, like mantra meditation in a relaxed posture. To help yourself stay in the present rather than drifting into fantasy, you can touch the thumb and first or middle finger of each hand together as you exhale and separate them a fraction of an inch as you inhale. I have a small ceremony for bridging the transition back to ordinary consciousness when I finish meditating. With each of my final 10 breaths, I focus on a different visual object or sound, and during that cycle of breath, I study it carefully without letting my attention waver. When you finish meditating, grasp your right wrist behind your back with your left hand and slowly bend forward as far as you can or until your head touches the floor. Let any tightness in your body go so you can drop forward a little farther, but don't try to push forward using your muscles. This bow is a sign of respect to everything around you that has shared your meditation time. If you're sitting in a lotus or cross-legged position as you do this, it's called the yogic seal. If your feet are asleep after you've finished meditating, you can massage and shake them before you try to stand. Once standing, you may want to stretch to limber up your body. A final word. Stories of people meditating are full of accounts of individuals breaking up in laughter. The right attitude toward meditation helps develop a lightheartedness, an ability to smile at ourselves when we notice something being too serious. Meditation includes living fully in my joy and my delight, a cosmic, comic me. End of chapter 20.